So I've really searched for how can I help other people have that kind of moment or those moments so that they can kind of become decision makers in their own learning process. I've realized it's quite difficult to do that systematically. You can kind of help students have these really fun experiences in isolation, but how do we do it systematically? That's really what I've been searching for the past 25 years.
Welcome to the Education Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bukhari, and today's guest is someone whose journey through education has been anything but conventional. Avery Rueb has spent 25 years as an educator, entrepreneur, and innovator, constantly pushing the boundaries of how we teach and learn. Avery has taught in 5 countries and developed expertise in second language gamification and transversal skills. These are the critical abilities that help students thrive beyond the classroom. As co-founder and director of pedagogy at Affordance Studios, he has led groundbreaking game-based learning projects with partners such as Desjardins Bank, Alloproof, Eli Lilly, and the Canadian federal government. His contributions to education have been recognized globally. He was even named Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres by the French government for his work in promoting the French language worldwide. Avery's journey started in Cleveland, where school felt rigid and uninspiring, until a single moment changed everything. A film in a university history class introduced him to the beauty of the French language, igniting a passion for learning that led him from Ohio to France and to Boston, and ultimately to Montreal, where he's built a career helping students take ownership of their learning. Now at Vanier College, he's establishing projects that build education and employability through digital badges and competency-based profiles, redefining how we assess and recognize student skills. Avery's approach to education is deeply rooted in his own experiences as both a student and a teacher. He believes learning should be personal, immersive, and above all, meaningful. He has spent years refining how to make education more engaging, whether through game design, project-based learning, or new approaches to assessment. And it's not just theory. He's been in the trenches experimenting, iterating, and figuring out what actually works. In this conversation, Avery and I dive into the experiences that shaped his thinking, his time as a competitive tennis player, the frustrations of traditional grading systems, and the power of real-world learning. We talk about the intersection of education and technology, how AI can serve both as a powerful tutor and a dangerous crutch, and the ways in which schools often measure success in ways that don't align with real learning. Avery also brings a critical lens to some of the biggest debates in education today: the role of technology in the classroom, the importance of fostering curiosity and independence, and how teachers can create environments where failure isn't something to fear, but a necessary step in the learning process. For anyone passionate about the future of learning, whether you're an educator, a district administrator, or even someone in Edtech, this episode is for you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Avery Rueb. Avery, welcome to the Education Matters podcast. Where does this podcast find you today?
I am in Montreal, Quebec. It's beautiful weather here, and I'm excited to talk with you, Jason.
Well, fantastic. Again, thank you. And at this point, I would have given you a proper introduction, but in case there's anything more recent I've missed, you want to give the audience a sense of what you're up to now.
Well, I've been in education for my entire career, 25 years. I've done a little bit of everything. The only thing I've never done is taught in an elementary school, but I believe that if you stuck me in an elementary school tomorrow, I could survive a full day and probably even become halfway decent at it over the course of a year. I love education because I feel like it's the pillar of our society. So I've been a teacher, I've been an entrepreneur, I've been, tried to help change, schools change through different avenues like pedagogy. And I am really just very, very interested in everything as education because I feel like this is the way that we can make our world a better place. So I like working on schools here, but I like learning about schools all over the planet. So I'm always reading. I'm always watching videos. I'm always listening to podcasts, finding out what's going on in the world so that I can take whatever that is and bring it into my own world.
Well, one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about you and our conversations is that you have this very, very active mind and very inquisitive mind, if I can put it that way. Can you maybe help the audience understand, where did that start? Where did you grow up? And what was it like growing up, where and when you did?
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is a wonderful place to grow up. Maybe not the most exciting place to visit, so I don't anticipate anyone coming to visit just to see Cleveland, but it's a great place to grow up. I did not like school. I found school to be very uninspiring for me. I felt very robotic in school. I was in a competitive learning environment where grades and standardized tests really determined whether you were good at school or bad at school, or whether you were smart or whether you weren't smart. And I did that for a very long time, all the way through high school and most of my university. And what happened one day was I was in a university class, a history class, and they showed a movie in French. I'd never really heard the French language spoken by real people before. I'd taken French classes before, but I'd never really heard it. And I saw this movie and I said, okay, that sounds like an incredibly beautiful language. Like, how do you learn a language? Where do you go? This was, before YouTube. So I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to kind of, interact with the French language. So I saw it and I said, how do I learn this language? My friend said, well, you should move to France. And so I moved to France. I lived there for a long time, about 4 years. Came back, taught French in Boston for a while, and then someone said, "Oh, you should go check out Montreal. It's francophone and it's in North America." I said, "That sounds amazing." So I came up here for a weekend, and I fell in love with Montreal. I got my permanent resident card. Now I'm a citizen. I've lived here for 15 years. So that movie really was this, what I sometimes call like a transformative learning experience, where I went from really a passive consumer of education or receiver of education to someone who became actively engaged and a decision maker in my own learning. I went back to school twice to get 2 different diplomas. And, I loved what I learned in those schooling experiences. But those schooling experiences weren't perfect. Sometimes the classes moved too quickly. Sometimes they were too theoretical. Sometimes I'd get a grade and I didn't even understand why I got a grade. But my passion, my excitement to learn this language and to kind of have these kind of experiences made it so that every time I faced something that wasn't perfect in my educational experience, I was able to overcome it. So I've really searched for how can I help other people have that kind of moment or those moments so that they can kind of become decision makers in their own learning process. I've realized it's quite difficult to do that systematically. You can kind of help students have these really fun experiences in isolation, but how do we do it systematically? That's really what I've been searching for the past 25 years. I've seen a lot of great systems out there, and I've tried to learn from those as much as possible. And then I try to bring it into the school that I work at right now, which is Vanier College. It's a community college in Montreal, and it's incredibly diverse. It's public. It's everything I love about school. Like, I love public. I love, diversity. I love, people coming in with different viewpoints, and, money is not really, enters into the picture. It's totally affordable for everyone. And so I've tried my best to help this community to learn from what's going on outside so that we can have as many as our students as possible having these transformational learning experiences.
Yeah, and I do want to spend the majority of the podcast talking about that work, because I really think the audience here will find it fascinating and informative. But if I can linger on a little bit longer, your experience, your background, would you say language was the first thing you loved to learn? Or was there something you remember even earlier than that?
Definitely something earlier than that. When I was about 4 or 5, I was introduced to tennis, the sport of tennis, and I took to it like a duck to water. I had an older brother who played tennis. My father started tennis late in his life, and he was not going to let that happen to his children. So he got us playing tennis very early. He was from Oklahoma, which is, like not necessarily the tennis haven, especially in the 1950s and 60s. So he wanted us to have tennis early on, and we were very lucky to have the resources to learn tennis because it can be an expensive sport. And we also were lucky to have very supportive parents who allowed us to play as much tennis as possible. So parallel, I was going to school, which I did not like. I did not understand why I was there. I did not really understand what I was learning. I just kind of did everything I was told to do because really the tacit agreement was that as long as I did well in school, I could play as much tennis as I wanted. So I just worked very hard in school, but I didn't know why I was doing it. I just said, okay, just get me the best grade possible, and so I can go play tennis. So I had this amazing, deep experience playing tennis, traveling, winning, losing, playing on tennis teams, playing individually, watching my brother. My brother was a very good tennis player. He played at Wimbledon, and he played professionally. I played very low level professional tennis after university. So I had these two worlds, which were so different. I was so passionate and so in love with tennis. And I mean, the only thing that stopped me from playing tennis was just getting injured. Like, you can't play 12 hours a day. You'll just get injured. So I would play, I don't know, 2-3 hours a day in the winter, and then the school year, and in the summer, maybe 4 to 6 hours. So I had these worlds. And, when I had that French experience watching the French movie, was the first time that I had kind of that deep learning experience, which was not related to tennis. It was the first time I fell in love with something other than tennis. And I realized that you could go to school for it, you could learn from it. So I kind of borrowed everything I had from tennis and brought it over to language learning. And then I got into what second language acquisition is. It's kind of the science of learning a language. I got into, how do I help people get better at learning French? And when I moved to Montreal, it was very helpful because there were a lot of people who need to learn French who maybe don't have a lot of confidence, or don't have necessarily some of the skills that they might need and the knowledge. And I was able to kind of help them. And that's what I've been doing for a really long time, is helping people learn how to learn French and have fun with it, but also, be able to speak on the phone, write emails, so have something more practical too, because Montreal kind of requires a deeper understanding of French to do well in the economy.
You actually stumbled upon an area we've never talked about, but I am absolutely fascinated by, and that's how important sport is for the development not only of individuals but of society at large. Any other lessons you think you learned in sport that you brought over to your everyday learning?
I mean, I do a lot of work now in my school with what we call soft skills, transversal skills. I mean, I learned everything there. I learned how to manage my time. I learned how to collaborate. I learned how to network, meet people. I learned how to make decisions. I learned how to persevere. Like, it was so complete. And my parents never pushed me to play tennis. I pushed myself. Like, I can go further. I can go farther. They supported me, which was incredibly important. If they were cutting me down and telling me I wasn't good enough and putting pressure on me, I probably wouldn't have had such a great experience. They were incredibly encouraging. So I maybe didn't understand how important that was, but I used that kind of love and support to really go as far as I could go. And, I have a moderate talent, and I played university and college tennis in the United States. I even played a little bit of professional tennis. I really went probably farther than my talent really should have allowed me to go, because I just loved it so much. So then I learned that, look, if you have passion, I know it's cheesy, right? But if you have passion, you can do a lot. So that's what
because the passion leads to dedication, right? I think that's a big piece that everyone leaves out when they talk about passions, right? The passion forced you to be so dedicated to the craft.
100%. And it made me super, super, super organized. So I could finish my work, my homework, get everything done, do the best I could. I didn't even know what I was doing. I would just answer multiple choice questions, write these papers. I didn't feel any connection to the learning, but I did it because I knew that if I did that and I did well enough and my parents were happy enough with it, I could play as much tennis as I wanted. That was not, if I had to go back again, I would try to have my parents help me to understand, what a positive relationship to school was. But we were in the 1990s, 1980s. We didn't know these things. We've kind of progressed a lot now. We understand maybe how to help young people have a better relationship to school. We don't always do it, but we understand that. But it's very true that that passion made me dedicated to do anything I could to play more tennis.
Excellent. That was a nice little sidebar. I didn't realize you're another one of us really dedicated and passionate athletes, because I do feel folks that have that experience early on and they understand that passion and commitment thrive later on. On one last question on that.
The idea would be is how we could have more young people have a connection to something. Sport can sometimes work for some students, but maybe it's art, maybe it's music, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's volunteering. But once you have that kind of deep connection to something, it's hard to stop. You kind of unleash the beast. And once you unleash the beast, you can kind of use that to get good at other things too. So we need to help as many people on planet Earth have those kind of deeper connections to things and sports and what have you. And I'd love to do that. It's difficult though. I've learned over time.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask this question fully cognizant that you are just beginning your journey as a parent. Congratulations, by the way.
3 weeks old.
3 weeks old, and you're in the thralls of having a newborn. But in your experiences outside of that, do you feel that we're, as a society, we're doing anything wrong when it comes to sports now? Like, it probably started, you and I are the same kind of or similar generation in which the helicopter parenting started in the, let's call it mid to late 90s, maybe even earlier than that. And I think there's been a lot of work done recently on what kind of negative impact that's had on resilience with kids. Do you have any sense of things that you would change in that regard outside the education system?
Well, one of the things that I think can happen in the United States especially is that there is this desire, need to go to a good university, right? There's this kind of brandification of higher education where if I go to a good university, I'm a good parent, I'm a good kid, I'm a good human, we're a good family. And what happens is sometimes is that kids get into sports and parents push because they want to have that validation. My child is good in the sport, and they get into this good university. That, luckily for me, I was able to separate those two things. I loved tennis so much, and I loved getting good at it, or not getting good at it, but getting better at it and improving and learning, that I never had it get dirtied by that. And my parents never had to push me because they saw how hard I was pushing myself. Like I was just going as far as I could go. But what happens a lot in the United States is that those things get mixed, and a lot of kids are pushed to do well in these sports because then it's a reflection of the parent, or it's a reflection of the family, or it's a reflection of where they go to school afterwards. And, I'm probably not going to be a perfect parent, probably hopefully to be like a B+ parent. I don't want my child to ever feel like that they're doing something, to get a good education, or to, get into a good school. I want them to do it because they enjoy it, they like it, they find some meaning in it. And then from there, how can I support you to, go as far as you want, or do what you want, or stop even, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to do something else. I think that that's quite difficult. And I'm definitely overestimating probably my ability to be, so easygoing and so positive, but I would strive to be that kind of parent.
Well, I think you're going to be that kind of wonderful parent in spades. And don't worry, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. I'm sure you've already found out.
I've made a bunch of mistakes already.
Yeah, there's no perfect way to do a diaper, despite what your mother-in-law will tell you. So you mentioned, more or less 25 years involved in education. I'm very interested in helping adjust the public narrative that is so negative about education all the time. And some things are justified, but I think most of what you hear in general about everything is negative publicity because it gets clicks and likes and all that kind of stuff. But can you describe some of the most inspiring things you've seen in your time in education?
Well, I feel like we have, and I know this is going to sound cheesy too, but I feel like every single teacher gets into teaching because they want to make a difference. They want to help young people. I'm maybe not 100%, but I think it's very high. So I think we have incredible teachers, and I'm not trying to run for office here. I'm not trying to get votes here. I really believe this. What I believe happens is that our system does not allow teachers to really reach the students as they kind of imagined that they could. I got into teaching because I thought, look, I did not like my schooling. I am going to do the exact opposite of what I had, and it's going to work. And for 25 years, I've been able to, do a good job in my classes and stuff like that, but I've never really been able to kind of reach the change or the level of help that I would like to reach, because I do think that the system has many flaws. I think our competitive grading system, where you've got a 73 and I've got a 74, well, I'm better than you, Jason. I think that that has major effects on our students. I think that this idea of time-based learning, like in our school, we have 45-hour classes or 60-hour classes. You take your 45-hour class and you get to the end and then you get a grade. That does not work for a lot of students. Some students take more time. Some students need less time. Time should not be the only determinant of how we learn. And it's not the only determinant, but it is a major determinant. So I think that if you're asking what I love about education, I really think teachers care so much about their students. And it's, again, maybe not 100%, just like there's not 100% of doctors who care all about their students or about their patients. I have a little bit of a window into that world. So I know that not all doctors are perfect. A lot of them are perfect, maybe close to 100, but not all of them. I would say very, very similar when it comes to teachers. So I think that that's something we need to build up. How then do we allow our teachers to kind of reach that level of help that they want to give to their students? That is a question that I've been wrestling with for 25 years. I found some things that I think can work, but it's very difficult to change what we already have, the system we have in place.
Yeah, and I certainly, again, want to come to some of those ideas and some of the work that you're doing now. But with those teachers that you have in mind, those really passionate teachers, what do their classrooms look like, sound like, feel like?
Well, I think that when you have teachers who are trying to bring their students to those transformational learning experiences, you have some classes where I'm at a community college, you've got like, a science class, and these kids might go to, pre-med. They got a lot of content. They got to get into those kids' brains. That is a tough world to kind of create a transformational learning experience out of it. So not everyone's on the level playing field, but I think that the teachers who are bringing their students into these, what are sometimes called real world learning experiences. So that can be volunteering, that can be internships, that can be travel, that can be entrepreneurship. I think those types of experiences, they don't guarantee that the students will have kind of that transformational learning experience, but they certainly kind of light a small fire. And if you can light maybe 3 or 4 of those mini fires, maybe they kind of catch fire together, and you can kind of have a student kind of make that transformation, become a decision maker in their own learning. So I think that, teachers who are doing those kinds of things, I think it is I applaud them, because they're really trying to allow their students to grow and have those amazing experiences. But it's not always easy to do that within our current system.
I agree. And hopefully we can get to some of that too. What, if anything, is different for students today than it was when we were going to school?
I think that is a good question. I probably have to sit and think about all the things that are different. I think social media and the phone is very, very important. I think our students' attention spans have been affected very significantly by the cell phone. I think also what they see has affected them. I think that there's some amazing things from social media, like being able to watch a YouTube video on physics, or be able to watch a YouTube video on World War II, and in 7 minutes, get this incredible, deep understanding of what's going on, and say, okay, well, I can use that to kind of go to the next, video or read or something about it. So I think there's a lot of benefit from that. Generative AI also, you can have these really deep conversations or get help on your homework. Yes, you can cheat with it, but you can also really have great learning opportunities with generative AI. I understand cheating exists, but there are good sides to it. So I think that the technology I think when technology is given to a student who's had that transformational learning experience and they're a decision maker in their own learning, I believe that the student is ready to use technology really to propel them forward. I believe that our schools don't always promote kind of that deeper kind of learning. And so sometimes this technology is used to find shortcuts and kind of, get a better grade spending less time. And then you have all the social media outside of school where you're getting bombarded by advertisements or by influencers. And I think that has a deep effect on how our students' brains work or our learners' brains work. And I'm not, a neuroscientist. I don't know everything about it, but I don't think all of it is positive. I don't know how much of it is negative, but I think a significant portion of that can be very negative.
Yeah, and a recent publication by Jonathan Haidt, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, The Anxious Generation, is certainly worth a read. He wrote a book about, let's say, 7 to 10 years ago, maybe not that long ago, but about the coddling of the American mind, which is looking at the effects of both helicopter parenting and social media on kids. I think, by and large, his premise is correct, to devastating effect. In terms of rates of anxiety, depression, suicide.
Yes.
And many other things in addition to social media that are happening and making this a much more complex world. But I think certainly you're right to point out that is a significant difference. I myself have pulled an about face in my view of the role of cell phones in the classroom. I thought they could have been used as pedagogical tools, but they've just become such distractions that I don't think it's really possible in a day-to-day classroom to have the phones present. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I like to look at systems, school systems, and how they work. And our time-based system is what we see most. It's the most popular version of school on planet Earth. You have a whole school year, 180 days. You have a class that's 45 hours. I think sometimes that system is not always perfectly set up so that students, are excited about learning and want to learn. Sometimes they look at it as, I've got to get through this, I've got to power through this, I've just got to get the good grade, and I got to move to the next thing, or I got to get a passing grade, whatever it is. I think some schools that use mastery-based learning, which is the idea that once I get to a specific level of understanding, I can go to the next topic, or I can stay in this topic and go deeper. I think sometimes those schools, systems, not, they can work in a classroom, but they're really kind of systems. I think that those can be very motivating. And so that cell phone use, I see in some of those schools, there's not very many of them on planet Earth, but I see a lot of those schools where kids are kind of more independent in their learning and they don't get so distracted because the learning is very exciting and it's very fun, and the cell phone is really used as a tool to kind of help elevate their learning. With that said, in a traditional school, in the school I work with, yes, I think that the cell phone can be very distracting. You're competing as a teacher. You're definitely competing against the cell phone, and the cell phone is very powerful. Winning against
it's impossible to compete with. I think is what I would suggest now.
I think that's probably about right.
So you mentioned AI. You have any thoughts on what you think the impact of AI will be on education? Let me give you some context. So let's say, if you can, just a thought experiment, it's nearly impossible to do, but 50 years out, how do you envision the education system looking? You can do it the good, the bad, or the ugly, or all of the above.
Well, that is a tough one. I think that it could go in a lot of different directions. I do believe that there is benefits of generative AI on learning. The idea of tutoring, like, I don't know if you've seen the Sal Khan video where he was working with his son, and his Khan-migo helps the son to solve a geometry problem where the generative AI asks questions, his son answers and is manipulating a triangle, and at the end gets the right answer. It's a little bit staged and it's a little bit fake, but let's pretend that we're 20 years out, 30 years out, 5 years out.
And it actually works that way.
And it works.
Yeah.
You definitely have a lot of benefits with that, because one of the strongest relationships in learning is one-to-one. If I can have a tutor working directly with a student, that is very powerful. So if that does work, there's a lot of benefit. You could think about that for math. You could think about that for reading. You could think about that for writing. You can think about that for science. There's a lot of things that can happen that would be amazing. The issue is, you know, two things. One would be the reliance on technology, kind of like social media, like, oh, it's not a big deal, you know, whatever, 15, 20 years ago, it's not a big deal. It's fine. You
Mm-hmm.
know, social media is cool. You know, you can meet people on it. And then what we
Mm.
see today is that it is different. There are a lot of negative consequences to social media. I think AI could be something similar to that. Um, so I do think that there is the negative consequences of becoming overly reliant on that. But there's also the other side of it is how do we maintain our humanity if we're interacting with the technology too much? And so, you know, the idea of having, you know, me interacting with a computer all day or 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day, what does that make me as a human? How do I, you know, maintain my humanity and all of that? And imagine, you know, I'm 48. I have a small addiction to my phone. You know, my brain was fully developed when I really got my first phone. What happens to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or 15-year-old who really starts to use AI for learning over time? Are they still, you know, fully human? Is it like they're technologically human and not human? What ends up happening? So 50 years out, I think it can go in a lot of directions. I think it could be a wonderful tool that helps a lot of people, if not all people on planet Earth, to kind of get good at math and science and history and problem solving and collaboration and decision making. I also think that it could go bad where we become, you know, way too reliant on it and we lose our humanity. I don't know which way it's going to go. I hope it's more positive than negative, but if I've seen anything with humanity is sometimes we go towards the negative side.
So if you had um, a magic wand to change the education system to go toward that, you know, more utopian vision of what we can achieve with all the technological power we've developed over the last, you know, 20, 30 years, um, what would every classroom look like? What would the system look like?
That is a good question. I think that one of the things that I find difficult is that our system is very inflexible. You know, we have a system where I have my class, I'm taking my class.
Bus
You know,
schedules, school
I got a
bells.
specific date to take this test, or I got a specific time to take this test. I've got a specific, you know, way I have to take this test. That I understand why we have that. If I, you know, in my community college, we've got 6,000 students. We've got, I don't know how many, you know, classes going at the same time, how many teachers are teaching those classes. It is quite difficult to create something that is much more flexible. So my hope is that we can create more flexibility in our learning environments, so that students who want to go faster can go faster. Students who want to take more time can take more time. Students who want to kind of get good at something, you know, maybe tangentially related to what they're supposed to be studying can do that, but still maybe not fall behind. I know it's kind of utopian, but there are systems out there that work this way. There's an online school that I've told you about before. It's called the Sora School. It's really quite a wonderful model to follow. It's not perfect because one, it's online, and so you're interacting with the screen all day. And I'm not advocating for online education. Like, you know, if that works for you, that's totally amazing. If it doesn't, I understand that. But they have a mastery-based system where students are able to kind of move at their own pace. They're always doing transdisciplinary projects. So there's a class called the Science of Sharks. So they're learning about, you know, what is a shark, and then they're learning about force and physics with related to that. So there's always something that is transdisciplinary about their work, and students are developing not only their academic skills, but also their soft skills, their transversal skills at the same time. And so collaboration is just as important as math. Perseverance and decision making and networking are just as important as history and English and French. So I think that if we could kind of create something that was more flexible, where students were getting to do more real world projects that were transdisciplinary, and also having the opportunity to develop these soft skills or transversal skills, sometimes they're called durable skills, at the same time as their academic skills, I think you would see students kind of wake up and be more excited about learning more quickly. It doesn't mean that we would reach everyone. I understand that it's not perfect for everyone, but if we could have more of those kind of flexible learning environments, I think we could reach more of our young people and engage them in learning and have them kind of become excited and passionate learners that, take on real world projects and affect positive change in their communities.
I think that's one of the best answers I've got to that question, which I ask every guest so far. And I think it's informed by your quite unique background. Can you talk a little bit about the work, the kind of dual roles you have, which I find fascinating? Let's start with the work you do at Afford and Studios. Can you give the audience a sense of that work and how you got into that and what that means to you?
Afford Studio is a educational game company. About 10 years ago, I met some people. I was very interested in this idea of how can games help us to learn. I'm not a gamer myself. I played Monopoly. I played Nintendo Entertainment System like Excitebike.
You're dating yourself by saying I'm not a gamer. I played Monopoly.
Monopoly. I played a little bit of Parcheesi. So I was not deeply a gamer, but I really love learning. And I saw how game mechanics can work. So I met some people who were really good at games. They'd done like a graduate program in game design, and they were working on educational games. And I said, I want to work on educational games. So we kind of joined forces. And over the years, I've got to work on really great projects like board games and language learning games and multiplayer, real-time decision-making games. So video games, board games, the whole 9 yards. It's really fun and it's really exciting. But one of the things I've also learned is what does it mean to turn out real-world projects for a client? What does it mean to try to get a user or users to be excited about your game and want to play it? Sometimes in school, it's not always the case, but sometimes school can be like imaginary. Like imagine you were writing a letter to this person, or imagine you were building a house for this, and that has value. Totally understand the value for it. But once it becomes real world, you've really got to up your game. Oh my gosh, I can't just kind of like, do a pretty good job on the art. I can't just do a pretty good job on the programming. It has to really be perfect because users are quite demanding. So how do we do that? And so I've had the opportunity to kind of fail and succeed in that, right? Oh, we've made a really great game. Let's give it to some people. And they're like, this game stinks. You're like, oh man, that's tough feedback to take. But then we've also had some successes where people say, oh my gosh, I love playing this game. I learned so much from it. So I've been able to kind of have those experiences. And then when I go back into the classroom, I feel like my teaching and my pedagogy is informed by that. How do we help our students to kind of up their game so that they are able to dig deep and really learn as much as they can to produce something, or to make something, or to help someone, to volunteer, to do an internship, and to use their learning to kind of do something really, really great. It is quite hard to do that. It takes a lot of extra planning and extra work, and sometimes I burn myself out trying to do that in my classroom, and sometimes it doesn't work. You think you've done this great thing and it's going to be amazing, and then the kids are like, this stinks. Like, oh man, that's tough feedback. But it's very much like working in a video game studio. Like sometimes you do well, sometimes you don't, but you try to learn from your mistakes and do better the next time.
Well, I love the acronym. I learned that. I wish I could remember which school I saw this, and I teach my kids. I'm coaching a baseball team too, and I coach them all the time with this. And it's the acronym FAIL, which is a first attempt in learning. And yes, that's the only way you get better is you try something, it doesn't work, you swallow your pride, you go back and you try it again, and you incrementally get better. That's also why I love asking people that have played sports what they've learned, because I think it's one of the fundamental lessons in that athletes learn.
Just to take one step there, if you look at school, though, failing in school is not always positive.
No, it's negative. It's a negative thing. Very negative. So, yes.
So how do we create an environment where people can have a first attempt in learning, or fail? Sometimes we call it fail fast, right? Fail really quickly and then learn and then get better at it. School doesn't always do that. If I have an 80 average and I try something really crazy and I get a 50, that destroys my GPA. It will sink my R score. We call it an R score at our school, which is like basically like a standard deviation. That is a major problem with school. And because real world is about that. And then our school, it really doesn't teach you, or teaches sometimes the exact opposite. So how do we bring that into schools? Mastery-based learning is one way of doing this, but they're just bringing real world learning into the classroom. That's another way of doing it.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this offline several times. In order for that to be the real process behind the education system, we have to figure out how we can do grading at scale that isn't about pass or fail percentage points. I'll credit University of Toronto professor Steve Jordans. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he kind of said that, this is an opportunity potentially for AI to scale, for example, oral examinations, right? And AI can help score and do this, which is essentially the only reason why standardized testing is around, is just because it scales really well. We know it's not great for practice, but it's good for scale. It's good in the masses, but not good in particular. So just another, kind of, let's call it like a utopian vision of what school can be, because I think it's super important to keep those things in mind.
I agree with that. It's just my fear is that once we have that, and once we're able to have great feedback for students, if we're able to get there, I believe that we will be able to get there, but I could be wrong. That my fear is that we become overly reliant on that. Oh, just send them off to this AI and have them work on it and then come back and tell me how you did. My fear is that we just become too reliant on that and we lose the humanity in our learning. I believe that
I completely agree.
A real possibility, but I hope that's not the path we go down. I'm going to certainly fight, as much as I can not to go down that path.
Well, and obviously I know you haven't listened to it because we're recording this at a time when I haven't yet published the episodes, but my first interview is with my father, who's a humanities professor, and his overarching message is the humanities matter now. The human matters now more than ever before. And so our education systems have to reflect, especially the traditions of the West, the good traditions of the West, that have emphasized, our shared humanity.
I agree. The things that I spend the most time on are transversal skills right now: collaboration, time management, networking. My students want to learn how to network. They love networking. They just don't know how to do it. They think that if I go and get 50 followers or 50 connections on LinkedIn, I'm networking. And once you explain to them that a connection on LinkedIn is very weak if you don't know the person in real life, but if you can bolster that with meeting the person in real life, or going to some meetups, or going to an open house, or doing an internship and meeting somebody,
having a meaningful conversation.
That is networking. And once they learn that, you unleash the beast. So we have I know we're going to talk about it, but I'll spring it right here. We have a project, we're calling it Skills for Life, but it's really just a soft skills project where we help students to understand what it means to get good at these. How do I measure where I am, and how do I measure my progress? And what does it mean to graduate from our community college competent in networking and time management and collaboration? And we had a pilot study with about 100 students, and we got really good data, which says, I find this stuff really fun to work on. And the way that we're working on it, which is a mastery-based, competency-based approach, they found that to be positive. Now, I'm not selling my idea to anyone else.
So let's actually take a second step back. Let's give the audience a sense, give them the 30,000-foot view of Skills for Life and the work you're doing at Vandy, because I think it is closer to that model that you've been describing as utopian. Because why I really want you to dive in here and explain this, because although we've been describing it as utopian, it is happening. It is happening in your college, you're in your classroom, you're trying to do it. It's also happening in other places. And really one of the main reasons for this podcast is to bring this to other folks, to make them realize that yes, we need these utopian visions, but it's actually closer than we think.
Yes, what I did was I just listened to podcasts, I read stuff, and I click on stuff, and I kind of network my way around learning to say, okay, well, this person talked about this. Well, let me check that out. This person. So I found these people who are doing what sometimes is referred to as competency-based education, where it's not just about competency, but it's also that a school says that if you graduate, you've actually attained that competency, which means that I certify that you are, a competent person in time management or a competent person in math. Sometimes in a time-based system, you can graduate with a 60%. Are you competent in that? So I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but the idea is that they use a rubric, a competency continua, and you can look at it and say, okay, well, let's say that's a 12-point scale to get good at time management. So, managing my tasks and deadlines. So we have a 12-point scale that goes out. I know what it means to be a level 2. I know what it means to be a level 4. It's very clear wording. And so then the student goes in, they can self-evaluate, or they can evaluate with a mentor, a peer mentor, or a teacher mentor. Whatever level they're at, that's good. If you're a level 2, no problem. If you're a level 12, no problem. You're not a good person. You're not a bad person. That's just where you're starting. Then our job is to help you to move up. So we can have conversations. You can take workshops. We can set up goals for you every single week. And the idea is that from that, you can watch a student progress. And once they understand that, and they understand that, like, this is not a competition, and that
or a judgment. You're not being graded for being judged in your grading.
And everyone can get to level 12. Once you see what level 12 is for time management, collaboration, networking, all the kids look at that like, I can do that, but they might not be able to do it day one. They might take time. And some of the students might take a term. They might take 2 terms. They might take, 3 years to get to the end. Who the hell cares? Just give them the time they need to get there, and then they're competent. So then once they see that, the relationship is so deeply positive. Why would they cheat? Why would I cheat on something like that if I want to get to a level 8 and I'm only at a level 6? If I cheat, I'm not really attaining the level 8. And I'm not giving you a grade on this. This is not determining whether you're going to get into a good university or a bad university. You're going to get a good job or a bad job. It just becomes a very deeply positive relationship. So I borrowed this system from an organization called Building 21, which is in Pennsylvania. They started 2 lab schools, and they work with about 50 schools all over North America to help implement a competency-based approach to academic and transversal skills. I just borrowed the transversal part and brought it into my classroom. And as I said, we rolled it out for about a term. I was not sure what the hell was going to happen. The feedback, we've gotten some research. We had a researcher come in and help us get some research. Like 60 to 80% of the students are saying, I really like this. This is really working for me. I want to do more of it. It doesn't work for everyone, maybe because we implemented it poorly, or maybe because it doesn't work for everyone. That's okay too. We're not saying here's a one-size-fits-all. We're just trying to reach as many students as possible. It's incredibly fun, very difficult, but I do believe that you will see stuff like this pop up because it does work and it's fun and the students find it motivating.
Do you think you have to start, or do you think that university or college is the best age level for it, or can you start earlier?
You can start earlier. They've worked with elementary schools. They've worked with middle schools. They worked with high schools. One of the students said to me, I wish I'd started learning about this in elementary school. He said that to me, which is beautiful. Like, I was so happy, but I almost started to cry. It means, like, how this student wanted this for so long. I wish we could have gotten it to them earlier. And it's no judgment on anyone. We are where we are right now, but let's try to get this to other people. And again, I'm not selling my system. It's free. I give it to anyone who wants it. Adapt it, change it, go find another system, whatever it is. I think students really want to work on this. So one, because it's fun and it's motivating. But again, if you're talking about AI, you're talking about humanity. How do we make our humans the best humans on the planet so that they're ready to take on the challenges of the 21st century? Once you're good at collaboration, maybe you're not going to only rely on AI to solve your problem. Maybe you can rely on other people. Time management, networking, the same thing.
Excellent. And well, hopefully you and I can continue to make some inroads for the work you're doing at, in the public system, because as you know, I'm a strong advocate of the public system. I don't think we get to any vision of a better society with, private schools. I just can't see how you get there.
I think they private schools can have wonderful systems, and they can even help public schools to do better too. I think that's great.
Can have a role to play for sure, but just by definition, it deals with a small swath of the population, right?
And we need to be thinking about everyone. When we're talking about education, we're talking about everybody.
Okay, so with that, couple wrap-up questions. One, what are you hopeful for? You have a young child. What are you hopeful for the future of your son?
If you gave me a magic wand, the one thing I would love for my son to do is fall in love with reading. I don't know how to do it. I would love for my child to think reading was amazing. I did not like reading as a kid. I was 21 years old and people would tell me they read a book for pleasure. And I said, that's not possible.
That
I don't
doesn't
even
make
know
sense.
what the
Yeah.
hell are you talking about? How could you ever read a book for pleasure? It doesn't make any sense to me. I would listen to them, but in my mind, I was thinking, this person is not telling the truth. How could you ever
They're
read a
lying.
book for pleasure? You're lying. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I've never read a book for pleasure. Once I graduated university and I was in love with French, I started reading books for fun. And I was 22. I mean, how many years did I miss because I didn't understand that? I think the act of reading and falling in love with a book and imagining everything that's going on and creating your own story, but following the story that you're reading. And it's just so powerful. I would love that. I would also love my child to love a sport to some level. Like they don't have to get good at it, but say, hey, I like this sport and I want to try this sport a little more. Same thing with music and same thing with art. Those would be the things that I would be over the moon if my child says, I like, trying to play the piano. I like trying to, play, whatever it is, bocce ball, whatever it is. And those were things that they really loved. I think everything else will fall into place around that. I don't know how to do that. So I'm open to feedback because those would be goals of mine.
Well, I'm pretty sure your child will do those things because you do things. One of my upcoming guests was a wonderful college professor and a school trustee for a long time, told me when I had kids, Jay, they're watching and they're listening. They're always watching and they're listening. So if you have books around, if they see you reading, if they see you playing tennis, they will mimic, and they will also mimic the things about yourself that you don't necessarily like. But if you do more of that than the other stuff, they will become that kind of person, or at least will have those kind of interests. So I think Stan was right there.
Take that advice.
Yeah, I think that was. I'm always happy to pass on good advice that I got too. That, and I think I told you zipper onesies for babies. Zipper onesies
Yes,
are the way to go.
I do now know what you mean by that.
Okay, so the penultimate question: what is something surprising that your social media algorithm says about you?
I don't know what my social algorithm says about me.
Okay,
I love Conan O'Brien.
So what's that?
I said I love Conan O'Brien. He's like this, late night talk show host. I always get Conan videos and I always watch him. He's an improviser, so I think I like the idea of improvisation and like making something out of nothing. So I love that. I would love to be Conan O'Brien, but I do not have the skills for that.
Yeah. Conan is really a genius, and then a comedic genius on top of that.
Yes.
Okay, so the last question: what book, podcast, video, album would you recommend for the listeners?
I watch a lot of videos. They're kind of webinars from the Aurora Institute. Aurora Institute is one of the leaders in what's called competency-based education. I don't want to get into the semantics because it gets a little not that exciting. But competency-based education is this idea of maybe not time determining learning, but it's this idea of mastery. How do I, when I've mastered something, I can move to the next level and have these kind of positive learning experiences. So I watch a lot of their webinars. They just had one on real world learning as an entry point into competency-based learning. They last probably too long. They're about 50 minutes. I can handle that because I just get excited by it and I watch them, or I can listen to them on the way to work. But they have a ton of videos. They are not incredibly popular. Maybe 200 people have watched them or at least clicked on them. But the Aurora Institute is a leader in this field, and Building 21, which is the organization that has really helped me to kind of think about learning differently, is frequently in some of those podcasts and on some of those webinars. So I just watch a lot of that. AURORA Institute. You can find them on YouTube. Again, you're not going to see hundreds and thousands of views or hundreds and thousands of shares, but I think they're really wonderful. It's wonderful content for anyone who's interested in looking at how learning can be done in a sustainable way, in a positive way, for everyone.
Well, we'll make sure we link to them here in the notes. But with that, Avery, thank you for your time, sir.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great talking to you.
This podcast is recorded on the Territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Bucheri. Until next time.